No single society has ever had the power, no leadership the resilience, and no faith the dynamism to impose its rite enduringly throughout the world. Universality has proved elusive for any conqueror, including Islam. As the early Islamic empire expanded, it eventually fragmented into multiple centers of power. A succession crisis following Muhammad's death led to a split between Sunni and Shia branches of Islam, a defining division in the contemporary Islamic world. In any new political enterprise, the question of succession is fraught. Where the founding leader is also regarded as the seal of the prophets, the final messenger of God, the debate becomes at once political and theological. Following Muhammad's passing in 632, a council of tribal elders selected his father-in-law, Abu Bakr, as his successor or caliph, as the figure best able to maintain consensus and harmony in the fledgling Muslim community. A minority believed that the matter should not have been put to a vote, which implied human fallibility, and that power should have passed automatically to the prophet's closest blood relation, his cousin Ali, an instrumental early convert to Islam and heroic warrior whom Muhammad was held to have personally selected. These factions eventually formed themselves into the two main branches of Islam. For the proponents of Abu Bakr, the father-in-law, and his immediate successors, Muhammad's relationship with God was unique and final. The caliphate's primary task was to preserve what Muhammad had revealed and built. They became the Sunnis, short for the people of tradition and consensus. For the party of Ali, Shiite Ali or Shia, who was the cousin, governance of the new Islamic society was also a spiritual task involving an esoteric element. In their view, Muslims could be brought into the correct relationship with Muhammad's revelation only if they were guided by spiritually gifted individuals directly descended from the Prophet and Ali, who were the trustees of the religion's hidden inner meanings. When Ali, eventually coming to power as the fourth caliph, was challenged by rebellion and murdered by a mob, the Sunnis treated the central task as the restoration of order in Islam and backed the faction that re-established stability. The Shias decried the new authorities as illegitimate usurpers and lionized the martyrs who had died in resistance. These general attitudes would prevail for centuries. Geopolitical rivalries compounded doctrinal differences. In time, separate Arab, Persian, Turkish, and Mughal spheres arose, each theoretically adhering to the same global Muslim order, but increasingly conducting themselves as rival monarchies with distinct interests and distinct interpretations of their faith. In some cases, including much of the Mughal period in India, these included a relatively ecumenical and even syncretic approach, stressing tolerance of other faiths and privileging practical foreign policy over sectarian imperatives. When beseeched to wage jihad against Shia Iran by fellow Sunni powers, Mughal India demurred, citing traditional amity and an absence of casus belli. Eventually, the momentum of the world project of Islam faltered as the first wave of Muslim expansion was reversed in Europe. Battles at Poitiers and Tours in France in 732 ended an unbroken string of advances by Arab and North African Muslim forces. The Byzantine defense of Asia Minor and Eastern Europe maintained for 4 centuries a line behind which the West began developing its own post-Roman ideas of world order. Western concepts began to be projected into Muslim-administered territories as the Byzantines marched back, temporarily, into the Middle East. The Crusades, forays led by orders of Christian knights into the historic Holy Land that Islam had incorporated in the 7th century, took Jerusalem in 1099, establishing a kingdom there that endured for roughly 2 centuries. The Christian Reconquista of Spain ended with the fall of Granada, the last Muslim foothold on the peninsula, in 1492, pushing Islam's western boundary back into North Africa. In the 13th century, the dream of universal order reappeared. A new Muslim empire led by the Ottoman Turks, followers of the conqueror Osman, expanded their once minor Anatolian state into a formidable power capable of challenging and eventually displacing the last vestiges of the Byzantine Empire. They began to construct a successor to the great Islamic caliphates of earlier centuries. Styling themselves the leaders of a unified Islamic world, they expanded in all directions by conflicts cast as holy wars, first into the Balkans. In 1453, they conquered Constantinople, Istanbul, the capital of Byzantium, geostrategically astride the Bosphorus Strait. Next, they moved south and west into the Arabian Peninsula, Mesopotamia, North Africa, Eastern Europe, and the Caucasus, becoming the dominant littoral power in the Eastern Mediterranean. Like the early Islamic Empire, the Ottomans conceived of their political mission as universal, upholding the order of the world. Sultans proclaimed themselves the shadow of God on earth and the universal ruler who protects the world. As its predecessors had a half millennium earlier, the Ottoman Empire came into contact with the states of Western Europe as it expanded westward. The divergence between what was later institutionalized as the multipolar European system and the Ottomans' concept of a single universal empire conferred a complex character on their interactions. The Ottomans refused to accept the European states as either legitimate or equal. This was not simply a matter of Islamic doctrine. It reflected as well a judgment about the reality of power relations, for the Ottoman Empire was territorially larger than all of the Western European states combined and for many decades militarily stronger than any conceivable coalition of them. In this context, formal Ottoman documents afforded European monarchs a protocol rank below the Sultan, the ruler of the Ottoman Empire. It was equivalent to his vizier or chief minister. By the same token, the European ambassadors permitted by the Ottomans to reside in Constantinople were cast in the status of supplicants. Compacts negotiated with these envoys were drafted not as bilateral treaties, but as unilateral and freely revocable grants of privilege by a magnanimous sultan.